I didn't realize the system was still connected when her voice note started to load. The screen froze mid-refresh, cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission I didn't give. Her name sat in the corner of the shared project channel. Then I heard her voice, soft, unfiltered, too close, saying something that sounded like it didn't belong in a workspace. Something about coming home. I reached for the mute button, but the connection didn't respond fast enough. 6 hours earlier, I was still convincing myself this was just another late deployment night. I had a half-empty coffee on my desk, cold enough to feel like punishment, and 3 monitors glowing with the same project dashboard she had been running since Monday. She was already in the system when I logged in, like she never really left it, even when she went home. I remember thinking she worked too much, the way her status stayed green long after everyone else went dark. But she always answered faster than anyone else, like she was waiting for my problems before I even had them. We called it just teamwork in meetings. Nobody in HR questioned it, and neither did I, because it never felt like something that needed a name. Until last week, when I went on that networking dinner I didn't want. The woman across from me smiled like she had already decided what kind of person I was supposed to be. She said I was hard to read, like it was a flaw instead of just how I survive systems that don't slow down. I thought about correcting her, but I didn't have the energy to translate myself for someone who wasn't listening anyway. So I just nodded, the way I always do when I'm somewhere I don't belong. That's when I noticed she wasn't there in my head the way she usually is. I kept checking my phone under the table, expecting a message from her about the system backup. But there was nothing, which should have been normal, but somehow wasn't. I remember feeling something unfamiliar, like static where her presence usually sits in my day. I left early, telling myself I was just tired from debugging. But I didn't go home right away. I drove through streets that didn't feel like mine, thinking about the way she says my name. In tickets when something breaks. I don't know why that detail stuck more than anything else. It just did. We always had this pattern, me fixing what she breaks, her making sure nothing ever falls apart long enough to be noticed. It never felt intimate when we were in it. Only now, when I'm alone, does it feel like something else entirely. I pulled into the parking garage under my building and sat there with the engine running longer than I should have. The silence in the car felt louder than any conversation I had all day. I kept thinking about her voice note, even though I hadn't heard it yet. Somewhere between work and whatever comes after it, I started to wonder if I had already been choosing her without realizing it. I thought about the dinner again, the woman telling me I was hard to read, and I realized she wasn't wrong. I just didn't know who had been reading me correctly all along. I turned off the engine and went upstairs, telling myself tomorrow would be just another day of tickets, systems, and silence between us. When I opened the door, her light was still on in the shared workspace channel, waiting like it always does. When the system reconnected, it didn't make a sound. No alert, no banner, just her workspace feed returning on my screen like it had never left. The green indicator beside her name stayed steady, meaningless at first glance, until I realized I was still inside the call. She thought I was gone. I should have been. Instead, I stayed frozen, fingers hovering over the mute control, waiting for the right thing to do to finally arrive. 6 hours earlier still felt unfinished in my head. Her voice note icon sat flagged in the shared project channel, unopened, like a door I hadn't decided to walk through. Then I heard her again, not speaking to me, but to someone else on her side of the connection. Her sister. The audio leaked through an unmuted mic, accidental and intimate in a way work never is. "You still there?" her sister asked. A pause. Then her voice, lower than I had ever heard it with me, stripped of all professional edges. "I thought he left." My chest tightened. I should have disconnected immediately. Instead, I watched waveform, activity spike across my monitor. "He?" her sister repeated, careful, not curious in a cruel way, but protective, like she was holding something fragile. Another pause. I could hear her breathing now, uneven. "I shouldn't say this," she said, and I knew she wasn't talking about work anymore. The cursor on my screen stopped moving. My hands went cold. "Say it," her sister said gently, firm but not pushing. That was the moment everything shifted. Her voice dropped further, like she was speaking into her hands. I keep thinking about him even when I shouldn't. A small, helpless laugh followed. He's who I want to come home to. The sentence hit without sound, like a system crash you don't hear coming. My chair creaked as I leaned forward. My elbow knocked my coffee, spilling it across printed logs I didn't even register anymore. I didn't move to clean it. My pulse was louder than the audio feed in my ears. Her sister didn't speak right away. When she did, it was quiet. "Do you think he feels that too?" she asked. I felt something tighten in my throat because I didn't know. I should have ended the connection then. That was the only responsible thing left. Instead, I reached for mute and missed it. Twice, my hand not steady enough to obey me. The screen flickered as the system struggled to stabilize, and in that flicker I heard her shift in her chair. A scrape of fabric. A breath held too long. "Wait," she said suddenly, sharper now, no longer speaking softly into private space. "Why is my mic still?" Her voice cut off mid-sentence. The green indicator beside her name switched from steady to pulsing red. She had realized it at the same time I did, that the system hadn't let her go. And for the first time all night, I opened my mouth to speak into a connection that was no longer hidden. I didn't press the button fast enough. The moment she realized the mic was still live, the entire system felt like it held its breath with us. Her name lit up on the screen, no longer just a profile in a project tool, but something immediate, something exposed. I could see my own reflection faintly in the monitor glow, hands hovering above the keyboard like they didn't belong to me. "I heard everything," I said, before she could say anything else. My voice came out lower than I expected, steadier than I felt. A pause. Then her voice returned, but it wasn't the same tone from earlier. "Then you know you shouldn't have," she said. Not angry, controlled, measured. I swallowed, glancing at the empty coffee cup on my desk, the one I had refilled 3 times without noticing. "I should have disconnected," I said. I didn't realize the system was still capturing audio. That was the truth, but it didn't fix anything. The cursor on her shared screen stopped moving. I could hear faint background noise on her end now. Fabric shifting, a chair rolling slightly, the sound of someone deciding whether to stay or leave. "So what now?" she asked. Not soft, not fragile, just direct. I looked at the call window, at the history of late nights we had logged without ever calling them personal. Ticket after ticket, fix after fix. Her messages always ending with, "You still there?" Like it meant more than uptime. I thought about the time she stayed with me when servers crashed at 2 a.m., how she never left the channel even when she could have. I thought about the blind dinner last week where I couldn't explain why nothing about it felt real, like I was watching my own life through glass. "I don't know," I admitted. That was worse than anything rehearsed. "But I know I shouldn't pretend I didn't hear you." Silence stretched again, heavy enough that I could hear my own breath. Then she said, "Are you reacting because you feel guilty, or because you actually understand what you heard?" The question landed harder than I expected. I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting to the jacket I had thrown over the side of it hours ago, still folded from a night that didn't matter anymore. "I've been trying to figure out why every time something falls apart in my life," I said slowly, "you're the one I end up calling first." Her breathing changed slightly on the other end. Not a reply yet, just awareness. I continued, "Even when I told myself it was just because you're reliable, it never explained why I waited for your response more than the solution." A soft voice interrupted her. Sighed her sister. "Don't answer him for the sake of filling silence," she said gently, protective, grounded. "Let him sit in it." I didn't argue, couldn't, because she was right. Then her voice came back, sharper now. "Don't turn this into something you're only saying because you're shocked," she said. "Because I can't afford to lose what we already have if you're just confused." I looked at the frozen cursor on her screen, at the system still connecting us like it hadn't decided whose side it was on. "I'm not confused," I said quietly. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't enough to resolve anything in real time. Her hand must have moved off the keyboard, because the audio shifted slightly, as if she had stepped back from the call. Then don't decide this like it's a ticket you can close, she said. A pause. Some things need time outside the system. And then the connection dropped, leaving my screen open, my words unfinished in the air where she had just been. I left my apartment without closing my laptop properly. The screen stayed awake behind me, the call log still open. Her name sitting there like it was waiting for me to decide what kind of man I was going to be after hearing something I was never supposed to hear. The hallway outside my unit smelled like detergent and old metal, the kind of building that never fully sleeps. I stood there for a second with my hand on the door handle, realizing I didn't have a plan for what I was about to do. Only the need to not let this stay inside a screen. 6 hours earlier, I could still pretend distance made things safer. Now it didn't. I drove without music, hands tight on the wheel, replaying her question from the call. Are you reacting because you feel guilty, or because you actually understand what you heard? I didn't have a clean answer. I parked in front of her building and just sat there, engine running, looking up at the windows until I found a light still on. 3rd floor. I didn't go in immediately. I didn't want to turn this into something that felt like interruption instead of choice. So I called her once. No answer. Then I texted, I'm outside. Only if you want. Minutes passed. The building door clicked open from the inside instead of the intercom buzzing. She stepped out into the small entrance hallway first, not fully outside yet, wearing a gray hoodie over work clothes that still looked like she hadn't decided the night was over. Her hair was tied back loosely, like she had done it without thinking. She stopped a few feet away, not closing the distance yet. If you're here to fix what happened, she said quietly. Don't. I shook my head. I'm not here to fix it. My voice sounded more controlled than I felt. The fluorescent light above us flickered once, like it was unsure whether to keep watching. She crossed her arms, leaning slightly against the doorframe. Then why are you here? That was the question. I looked at her properly for the first time without a screen between us. No cursor. No logs. No system translating us into tasks. Just her. Because if that call never happened, I said slowly, I don't think I would have said anything either. She didn't move, so I continued, quieter. I've spent months calling you first when things break. Not because I was assigned to you, because I couldn't think straight until you were there. I paused, realizing how unfixable that sounded when said out loud. That blind dinner last week. I left early because I kept comparing everything to how it feels when you're on the other end of a problem. And nothing matched. Her expression shifted slightly, not softening, but becoming more alert, like she was deciding whether I was being honest or just overwhelmed. That doesn't mean you choose me because of confusion, she said. I can't be your reaction to something else not working. I nodded immediately. I know. A beat. And I'm not asking you to be. Silence settled between us again, but this time it wasn't empty. Felt like space we both had to stand in. I stepped closer, stopping before I crossed anything that would feel like pressure. If I'm wrong, I said, you don't owe me anything tonight, not even conversation. She studied me for a long moment, then pushed off the frame. She didn't step back inside. She also didn't come closer. Instead, she reached out and lightly placed her hand against my wrist. Steady, grounding, intentional. Then don't turn this into something we forget in the morning, she said. If you say it again, you say it without a screen between us. And she left her hand there, waiting for what I would do next. When she left her hand on my wrist, she didn't pull me forward or push me away. She just held it like we were both learning a new language with no instructions. Then she let go first. Not because the moment ended, but because she decided the pace. Tomorrow, she said, don't show up like this again without warning. It wasn't rejection. It was structure. I nodded because anything else would have been pretending I understood more than I did. She went back inside. The door closed softly, not like an ending, more like a rule being written. I stayed in my car afterward, engine off, hands still warm where she had touched me. The empty passenger seat beside me didn't feel empty anymore in a way I couldn't explain. The next morning, I found her jacket on my office chair inside the shared system space. Not forgotten. Placed. Intentional. I didn't return it. I folded it once, then left it there like I was testing whether it could exist in my world without breaking anything. 2 days later, she walked past my desk, grabbed her coffee from the edge without asking, and said, "You're late on deployment notes." Normal voice, normal words, nothing about last night mentioned. But everything between us had shifted into something with weight. I started noticing small proofs I didn't understand at first. A second toothbrush in her bathroom when I stayed late fixing a rollback. My laptop open on her kitchen table while she reviewed timelines, neither of us moving it. She worked around my presence like it was part of the room now. I did the same. I stopped only calling her when systems broke. I started sending her things from my day that didn't matter: traffic, weather, a failed coffee machine in the lobby. She didn't always respond fast, but she always referenced them later like she had stored them somewhere. She kept her calendar strict, leadership blocks, client calls, project reviews, but she added one slot labeled only buffer. I didn't ask what it meant. Learn to show up without expectation. One night she handed me a spare key to her apartment. "For emergencies," she said, then after a pause, "and normal ones." I held it longer than I meant to before putting it in my pocket. That night I made coffee in her kitchen while she was still on a call in the other room. I left one cup on the counter for her before I left. She didn't drink it immediately. She drank it after I was gone. The next morning at work, I noticed her desk was slightly rearranged. My chair wasn't beside hers anymore, but angled closer than before. I matched my monitor to it without thinking. And I realized then that being allowed into someone's life wasn't about being closer. It was about learning how to exist without interrupting the shape they already built. The first real fracture didn't sound like a breakup. It sounded like my keyboard clicking before I realized she had already fixed the problem herself. I woke up to find her deployment schedule adjusted, not by her hand, but by mine. I had logged in late the night before, saw a failing service, and pushed a patch through without asking her. It was small in my head, just maintenance. But when she walked into the office, she didn't sit down right away. She stood behind my chair and looked at the screen longer than she looked at me. "Did you approve this with me?" she asked. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I turned slightly, still half in system thinking. "It was breaking," I said. "I didn't want you to wake up to it." She set her coffee down on the edge of the desk. Not gently, not aggressively, just placed it like a decision. "That's not your call," she said. The words didn't accuse me of being wrong. They accused me of not asking. I stood up too fast, the chair scraping behind me. "I fixed it," I said, and immediately regretted how that sounded, like fixing meant permission. Her eyes shifted to the dashboard, then back to me. "You keep doing that," she said. "You step in before I decide I need help." I tried to explain, but she raised a hand, not to stop me speaking, to slow me down. That was worse. We went back to her apartment that night without talking much. The kitchen light was on. There were 2 bowls on the counter, both filled earlier and now cold. She didn't touch hers. I didn't either. My jacket was still on her chair from 2 nights ago. Her laptop was closed too hard, like someone had shut it to end a conversation it couldn't finish. She finally said, "I don't need someone who predicts my decisions for me." I felt that land differently than the rest, because I thought I was protecting her. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I need someone who asks before they act." Silence stretched between us, full of everything we had been doing right and wrong at the same time. I sat down slowly. "I thought I was helping," I said. "I know," she replied. That was what made it real. Not anger, recognition. She walked to the hallway and came back with the spare key I had left on her table days ago. She didn't take it away. She placed it next to it. "We need rules," she said. I nodded. We wrote them on a notepad. No fixing without asking. No disappearing mid-conversation. No assuming silence means agreement. She added one more. "We don't replace each other's decisions." I added, "We don't use proximity as control." For the first time, it didn't feel like romance. Felt like structure. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. An email from HR about a cross-team restructuring. Her name was on the list of possible relocations to another city office, effective soon, pending project continuity review. The email came before the city fully woke up. I saw it on my phone while the apartment was still dark, the kind of gray light that makes everything feel undecided. HR subject, project restructure, cross-office deployment review. Her name was listed halfway down, not as a termination, not as a warning, but as a possibility that had already been shaped without her input. Transfer to Seattle office. 6-month minimum. Effective pending final approval from leadership board. I read it 3 times before my brain stopped translating it as text and started treating it like movement. Real motion. Real distance. The kitchen behind me still smelled like last night's burnt coffee, and the rules we wrote on a paper napkin were still on her table, corners curling slightly from humidity. No fixing without asking. No disappearing mid-conversation. No using proximity as control. Now control was happening somewhere else entirely. She didn't call me when she found out. She called her sister first. I only knew because I saw the missed call on my screen while I was already halfway to her building. When I arrived, she was standing near the window with her laptop open on the counter, half dressed for work but not moving toward it. The email was still on her screen, glowing like a decision she hadn't agreed to yet. "They're offering me the Seattle lead," she said when she finally noticed me. Not surprised I was there, just aware I would be. Her voice wasn't shaken. It was measured, like she was already in a meeting without chairs. I didn't answer right away because I could see what this actually meant for her. Not just distance. Rebuild. New team. New reporting structure. A role that matched what she had been working toward for years before I ever became part of her nights. Her sister was on speaker in the background when I walked in. "You don't decline leadership opportunities because of someone you just started trusting," she said gently, not attacking, but anchoring her. I understood that voice. It wasn't trying to win. It was trying to protect a life she had already built. She looked at me then, finally closing the laptop halfway like she couldn't stand seeing it open anymore. "If I stay," she said, "I'm not choosing stability. I'm choosing us over what I built before us." I stepped closer but didn't touch anything in the room. I could see her keys on the counter, her badge, her calendar printed out like she needed to see time in physical form to believe it. "And if you go," I said, "you're not abandoning anything. You're doing exactly what you've always done. Moving forward." She nodded once, like she already knew that version of the answer existed. Then she said something quieter. "But I can't make a choice where I disappear from myself either way." That was when I felt it, the real structure of the problem. Not love. Not distance. Identity pulling in. 2 directions that didn't care about our rules. Her sister spoke again, softer this time. "You don't decide today," she said. "You decide what you refuse to lose." The room went still after that. My phone lit again with the HR follow-up. Confirmation needed within 72 hours. Her hand hovered over the laptop trackpad but didn't click anything. 2 futures sat in front of her now, equally real, equally costly. One with a boarding pass already waiting in the system. One with a job she had built her name inside of. And neither one could exist without the other asking her to give something up that wasn't negotiable anymore. I didn't speak for a while because what I felt wasn't a conclusion, it was adjustment. She was still rewriting the structure of both our lives like it was code that needed to compile under pressure. I watched her move sticky notes across the whiteboard, labeling one city as primary and the other as secondary without ever treating either as lesser. Then she turned to me and said, "If you are in this, you are in it operationally, not emotionally guessing." I nodded. That was the only language that made sense between us. I added my name under cross-system reliability lead on the board with a marker that barely worked, the ink fading halfway through my signature. She didn't fix it. She let it stay imperfect. That was her version of trust. Then I wrote one more thing under the rule set. We don't disappear when it gets difficult. Outside the apartment window, I saw the city lights stretch toward 2 directions at once, like the decision had already expanded beyond us. My phone lit up with a calendar update marking Seattle planning review, and hers pinged with a leadership sync in the same hour. She looked at me and asked quietly, "What do we call this when it stops being something we hide and starts being something we build?" I didn't answer immediately because I realized there wasn't a word in any system we used that fit it yet. Only rules, only structure, only presence. And for the first time, that felt like enough to begin. When I walked into the office that morning, nothing looked different at first, but everything already was. Her desk wasn't moved closer to mine anymore. Instead, we had rebuilt the room around a structure we both designed the night before, 2 workstations facing the same whiteboard, 2 cities mapped in color-coded lines across a calendar that now lived in both of our systems. Seattle was still on the board, but it no longer looked like separation. It looked like extension. She was already there, sleeves rolled up, marker in hand, rewriting timelines with the same calm precision she used when she fixed problems no one else saw coming. On the table between us were 2 sets of keys now, mine and hers, not exchanged like promises, but placed like responsibilities. "We don't treat distance as absence anymore," she said without looking up. I nodded, then added travel blocks into the shared system, not as exceptions but as structure. My role changed on paper first: cross-city systems lead, distributed support architecture. Hers stayed leadership, but now with remote operational authority. Nothing about her career was reduced. If anything, it expanded in directions she had never been allowed to consider before. Later that day, I found her jacket still on the chair where it had always ended up during long nights. But now there was a second one beside it. Mine. Not borrowed. Not temporary. Just there. In the apartment, half the closet space had been reorganized without being merged. She didn't erase her side of the room. She built space for mine without collapsing her own. I noticed the small things first. 2 coffee mugs by the sink. 2 laptops charging in different corners. A shared notebook open on the counter with tasks written in 2 different handwriting styles that somehow agreed with each other. That night, HR finalized the approval. Seattle expansion team, dual site operation granted under pilot structure. No relocation demand. Choice preserved. She read the email once, then closed it without celebration. "This only works if we stay honest in real time," she said. I understood what she meant. That was when I realized the system between us was still running the same communication channel that had once exposed everything by accident. The voice interface was still active in the background of our workspace tools. She looked at it, then at me. "It's still open," I said quietly. She nodded. Not surprised. Not afraid. We both knew what that meant now. We didn't rush to close it. Instead, she leaned slightly toward the mic and said, clearly, "We're here." I followed without hesitation. "We're choosing this." A pause. Then I added, "On purpose." There was no shock this time. Only confirmation. Later, when the system logged the recording, neither of us tried to delete it. On the whiteboard behind us, between Seattle and our current city, she wrote one final line. Not a title, not a label, but a working state. I looked at it, then at her, and realized home was a decision we kept making together.